When I see some of my members moving way too far to the left, I can bring them together. And I can get them to agree to do some things that they fundamentally do not believe in. But I can't do the same on the Republican side of the aisle. So I got to figure out ways to work with them, to bring them on board. And I can't think about structurally what is the best budget that you can concoct that is in the best interest of California. I got to think about how do I get 54 votes? And that is my challenge every year when I have to do a budget.
Again, that was a small sampling, but again, you heard Speaker Fabian-Nunez there basically admitting that, you know, he has to so focus on this notion of a two-thirds vote, of getting the 54 votes in the Assembly, that it's hard to focus on exactly what's in the budget. And Nunez there was talking about one of those reforms that's talked about a lot, which is removing the two-thirds vote requirement to pass a budget, making it a simple majority. California is one of only 3 states in the nation whose legislature has to pass a budget by a two-thirds vote, and clearly the largest state in the nation that happens. But on this issue of is the legislature dysfunctional at this event, which happened here on Tuesday in Sacramento, Jim-Brulte, the former Republican leader in the legislature, had what I thought was a really fascinating examination of the dysfunction. And I think he made a little news here, as you'll hear him talking about is the legislature dysfunctional. But also listen to what he talks about one of the causes of that, and one of the causes of polarization of politics at the state capitol now, which he believes, quite frankly, is declining membership in the two parties. I thought that was very fascinating. But here's Jim-Brulte, former leader of the Republicans in the state capitol.
Do I think there's a single reform? No. I think there are 3 specific reforms because I do think structure matters. First of all, I supported Prop 140. I'm a big believer in term limits. You have to extend the terms of members of the legislature. It's why I am supporting the current term limit legislation. 6 years is not enough in the Assembly. Somewhere in California, a Democrat's going to be elected next November. They're going to go to Hertzberg-Leonard University to learn a week about being a legislature. They're going to come back in January, and in February, before they know where the ATM is in the basement cafeteria to put money in their wallet, they're going to be presiding over multi-billion-dollar decisions that affect all of us. I don't think they have the experience to do that. 6 years in the Assembly gives us that. There's also another dynamic that 6 years gives us. Prior to term limits, the special interests needed the legislative leaders. Post-term limits, the legislative leaders need the special interests. And that's a paradigm shift that I don't think is healthy.
That's Jim-Brulte, former Republican Assembly leader, former Republican Senate leader, talking about term limits. And as you can hear right there, which I think is a little bit of news, and the supporters of Prop 93 on the February ballot will certainly be touting this, Jim-Brulte, former Republican leader in the legislature, appears to become the first prominent Republican to endorse the term limits initiative, the modification of term limits, Proposition 93. Brulte went on to talk a little bit also about changes that have happened in California politics as a result of the voters who now declare themselves to be independent, nonpartisans, or what we call decline-to-state voters. Here's Brulte on that.
Redistricting is the most partisan act that a political party can engage in. It is a blatant conflict of interest for legislators to draw their own districts. It is not why we have a partisan legislature. The legislature is increasingly partisan, not because of redistricting, as many pundits say. That helps. But we ought to fix that part because it's an inherent conflict of interest to draw your own districts. We need a few more competitive seats. As long as you want to comply with federal law, you're never going to get competitive seats in most of the states because you can't create a competitive seat based in Compton any more than you can create a competitive seat in Orange County for Democrats. There's one there. That's the reason, by the way, the legislature is polarized is because from 1990 we went with 8% of the electorate were declined to state. Today it's 19.2. Who are they? They're moderate Democrats that have left John's party. They're moderate Republicans that have left my party. When you void moderates out of parties, you empower the wings. When I ran for the Assembly in 1990, conservatives had influence in our party primary. That is no longer the case. They have dominance in my party primary. The reverse is true with the Democrats. That's why the legislature is polarized. That's why Governor Davis had problems with his left wing and why Governor Schwarzenegger has problems with his right wing.
Again, that was Jim-Brulte, former Senate Republican leader, former Assembly Republican leader, speaking at this event on Tuesday in Sacramento. And pretty interesting, I think, to talk about the decline of state voters, these nonpartisan voters, and the rise of them, and how they perhaps are the moderate voters that have deserted the two major parties in California. Also in this discussion, I'm talking about legislative reforms, was the issue of redistricting. There was some news about that this week where Governor Schwarzenegger endorsed a new proposed initiative to change the way political maps are drawn. Of course, this initiative would only change how maps are drawn for the legislature, giving that power to an independent commission, letting the legislature continue to draw the maps for Congress. That could become an issue as the governor tries to gather signatures for this initiative, and then everyone says that perhaps the legislature will come back to try to deal with this issue themselves rather than this going through the initiative process to get on the ballot. But redistricting was a topic in this meeting of the former elected officials, and quintessential John-Burton, the former Senate Democratic leader, Democrat from San Francisco, the irascible John-Burton, the sometimes quotable but difficult to put on the air because of, shall we say, the former senator's penchant for words that are not in the family hour. So I will warn you now that this is John-Burton uncensored, talking about redistricting and other stuff.
I would like everybody here, when you go home, talk to your neighbor, go to the grocery store and say, does anybody give a shit about redistricting? It is the biggest bogus issue for the editorial boards. If you take away Common Cause, you got nothing. People don't give a shit. They don't understand it. And reapportionment has been done partisan-wise since the great days of Eldridge Gerry, all right? The world seems to live. Term limits, I mean, it's just a dumb idea anyway, and if you look, not at the party, but if you look at the individual, it used to be the average was like almost 7 years that somebody served in the assembly and more than that. But redistricting, people do not care about, they do not understand it, and it's a bogus issue because the press has to write about something, the wonderful editorial boards, you know, they're wonderful. Then you got Arnold, he's looking for something to do because he's, you know, he's like Ray going through withdrawal. He hasn't had anything to raise money for a while. So he's got another issue, and I'll close with this. Ray Davis promised himself once that he wasn't going to raise money for a month. It's like giving up something for Lent. And I jokingly said to somebody, I said, I bet he's going through withdrawals. And I asked him one day, I said, how you doing? And he said, 3 more days.
Thank you.
That was John-Burton. That is the John-Burton reporter's herd, and that's why sometimes he's difficult to put in my stories as a radio reporter. The former Democratic leader of the state Senate talking about why he doesn't think redistricting is a big issue. Of course, some people now think that the voters are starting to understand redistricting and that perhaps that's showing up in the polling. But also there at the end, you heard Burton going back after Gray Davis. John-Burton and Gray Davis did not get along. It was no secret. At the end of the Gray Davis administration, when the former governor, those budgets were very painful to craft, and Burton and Davis were not friends, were not fast friends. And you heard Burton taking another shot at Davis's reputation as a prodigious fundraiser there. But again, the always colorful John-Burton speaking there.